Redefining and Integrating Generational Dynamics. Alan Barr, Partner, Private Enterprise, KPMG Africa and South Africa. Alan has more than 28 years of audit and advisory experience and 20 years as partner. He currently serves as the managing partner of the Port Elizabeth office as well as head of KPMG Private Enterprise Africa and South Africa. Vanessa Olver is the founder of Quantum Change and a non-executive director at Investec Group. She is a chartered accountant with a proven ability to set and drive strategy, manage all aspects of the business, build, lead, and motivate highly effective teams across borders and cultures. Ayushi Chandaria, student, Harvard University, a former competitive swimmer on the Kenyan national team. Ayushi Chandaria is passionate about technology, design, and social impact, and initiated a groundbreaking program in paraplegic swimming. She is completing her MBA at Harvard Business School. The moderator is Gugulethu Mfupi, award-winning journalist, broadcaster, and moderator.
Thank you so much, everybody, for the wonderful introduction. Truly appreciate it. And a happy International Women's Day to each and every one of you who are present. To the gents, thank you for joining us in celebration of this particular occasion. So we appreciate your time. I am ecstatic to see this room so packed. Vibrant, funky, energetic, and of course all of you keen and eager to listen, learn, and observe in terms of the feedback and outcomes that have been shared with you today. I'm really intrigued as well. So far we've had phenomenal conversations about pioneers in various streams and industries. We've also heard from those within the creative space and fundamentally picked up on some key leadership lessons from women who, in support and in partnership with their male counterparts, are certainly driving the narrative forward. And this underscores our conversation for this panel discussion. Understanding how best it is that as we look to shape the business narrative across the continent and the world, that we do so not only in the ecosystem of society, but fundamentally within families as well, which is typically where it does start. So, just to gauge some interest in audience interaction, how many of you are part of family businesses or own a business within your families? Yay, nay? Happy to hear the volume and see some hands up. A fair amount, yes, and some significant hands coming up. And this really does speak to how it is that we not only grow and actively participate in these industries and businesses that we form, but how do we adequately manage the wealth factor, generational shifts within the business, and of course continuity, which remains critical for organizations. These just form part of the themes that we're going to discuss with my panel today, effectively understanding their backgrounds, how it does interplay with this particular topic, and some lessons that we can all implement in our careers and businesses going forward. So perhaps I'll start with yourself, Ayushi. Given the fact that your introduction and your bio has been highlighted, you're certainly on a path to tracking your own career and trajectory in terms of your profession. However, you also come from quite an influential and trailblazing family within Kenya that has really contributed significantly to society. I'm keen to understand from your perspective, coming from a family-owned business, yet building and crafting your own career, what key nuances stand out for you in terms of establishing or the lessons that you've learned from that particular background?
So I think the first thing is to understand, like, my family, the work they've done, what the business is about, and really respect that they have built this business and they do have experience. And I think whether I have my own career or join the family, to really learn from them, witness what they do. That's the first one. I also think communication. I think trying to understand what they're doing, trying to understand what they want me to do, and what will make them proud, as well as trying to explain what matters to me and why is like what keeps the discussions going, whether I do my own thing, join my business. And the last thing I think is to stay involved with the family, whether it's in the business, whether it's in the charitable initiatives, whether it's like even planning family things together. It's to kind of be involved and keep the family together, because that will be the next generation.
100%. I'll come back to the theme around being involved in keeping the family together, because when business gets involved, money and wealth need to be discussed, individual prospects as well. I can imagine that it does add a different dynamic. I'd like to come to you, Vanessa, as well, just purely given that you also come from a fairly similar background to Ayushi, given that your dad introduced you to the world of hospitality and tourism in terms of entrepreneurship, but you've crafted your own path as well, still wearing the corporate hat in terms of coming from a background as a chartered accountant and working in financial services. Key nuances that stand out for you, especially being a corporate leader who views family businesses as well from that lens.
So I think I'm very fortunate to have had both the hats, and I still play in both the spaces. I find it particularly challenging when you do look at your family business and you go, sure, but do I really want to do this? And I think that's a challenge that I think we're going to see many generations experience. Sure, do I really want to follow in my father's steps? Do I really want to follow in the business that has always been there? So I think that's one of the big fundamental challenges you're going to see. I think the other thing that we've all experienced, we had COVID, and that brought about a sense of, okay, we're not invincible. We may not be here tomorrow. So how do we start thinking about succession planning in all of our family and our businesses, and how do we fast track that? I don't think there's ever been a time as critical as now to consider that. So those are some of the things that have come to play, especially in my world of late, which is, okay, some forward planning. Who's going to take over from me?
Yep.
Do my children want to do what I've been doing? And do my children want to wear as many hats as I do? And those are the things I've got to think about. My children are a little bit younger, but everybody that's got very well-established businesses and have got individuals that are coming up in the business world, you need to start charting those paths and planning that and making sure people understand what role they're going to play in that family business.
I'm so glad you mentioned this because I can imagine we're all seated here and thinking succession. It's a series that many people have watched and perhaps followed through in terms of its progress. And that really speaks to the unique nuances that we typically do see here, Alan. And this is your area and field of expertise as well. Your background as a chartered accountant, working through the corporate landscape, but in a very unique and nuanced environment where you take care of high net worth clients, specifically from family-owned backgrounds. I can imagine watching Succession must have been a feast for you, but it also does highlight not only some of the learnings that Vanessa has alluded to, but some of the complexities that you must have to manage and I guess engage family-owned businesses on. Perhaps talk us through some of those complexities, but fundamentally how there's always a solution to those themes.
Yeah, thanks very much. And I think one of the things to understand is family businesses play such an important contribution to any economy, especially in Africa, roughly about 80%. So their sustainability is so important. And what we're finding is more, especially because of COVID, we're trying to professionalize, not corporatize, very important.
And maybe explain that difference there, because some of us might be thinking, surely it's the same thing.
Not quite. It's you want to maintain that entrepreneurial spirit that's made them successful, but at the same time bringing in the right structures to facilitate the communication, as we mentioned, to make the decision so that when succession happens, it's not an event, it's a process. And that's very, very important. And to understand for the families, a family business doesn't mean a family has to work in the business. It's who's controlling from an ownership point of view. And it's about getting the best person in each of the roles to run the business, the governance, the ownership, and also the connectivity of the family. So it's very important, and I think more and more businesses are starting to see that as the next generations are coming to the fore, what role they want to play. And it's to make sure that there's a plan in place to manage that process. Once again, it's not an event. And unfortunately, fortunately with COVID, what everyone realized, especially the senior generation, they are not invincible. They will unfortunately die or pass away, and therefore they need to put plans in place.
100%. I'm glad you mentioned the generation nuances, right? Because typically it's said that any wealth that is accrued in a family erodes by the time it gets to the third generation. It's built up by the first, the second gets to enjoy it, and perhaps there's some form of erosion. You smile at me as I say that, Alan, because perhaps it's something that you've witnessed, but it does also encourage a very strong point of conversation to understand how we preserve that particular aspect of wealth. So when it comes to baby boomers, millennials, Gen Zs, what are we seeing in terms of those conversations and dynamics? If I can start with you, and perhaps Ayushi, you can share your perspective as a millennial as to how you might be engaging with your peers and your family to provide a fresh perspective there.
So that pivotal point between second and third generation is key. And if there's not clear communication between the generations on what they want to do, what is their shared purpose, what is their plan for the next 50 years, the shared values, then it will fall apart. But everyone talks about the negativity of that switch, but it's the businesses that survive that switch and start to grow and build. And that's what it comes about. So it's about putting in proper communications, discussions between the generations, because the next generation can take the business, transform it into new avenues, which we saw during COVID as well. Traditional business started moving into digital areas, agricultural moving into IT, in order to make the business sustainable, because a family grows faster than a business. And therefore, if that's the case, you need to grow the business faster than the family.
That's such an important point you mentioned. The family can't grow faster than the business. The business needs to grow faster than the family, and it's one that we'll come back to. Ayushi, your experience, Gen Z, fresh mind, new perspective, just completed your studies. I can imagine that your interesting perspective must be met with some excitement around the family table as well.
Yeah, so I'm actually 5th generation in my family business, and one thing I've seen and I think goes well is to let Gen Z be Gen Z, let them be bold, let them have their crazy ideas, and to match it with the experience of the older generation. So instead of trying to like control Gen Z and like stop them from being innovating, have their tech like new advances, try to combine the two, and that way you're getting the benefits of both and growing the business even more quickly. And finally, you have to realize that Gen Z or the next generations will take over the business, and their mindset is not going to change. It's not going to become what their grandparents were. So to allow them to like take their own path forward.
100%. An open question, and perhaps coming to you here, Vanessa, reverse mentorship. Do you find that, given your experience within your family-owned business and even observations that you've witnessed, that there is an opportunity for the sense of reverse mentorship, where the younger generation provides that innovative spark that kickstarts the business to a new level?
It's absolutely critical. You see it in most organizations today, adopting this reverse mentorship, because everybody recognizes that there is value to be had in both what I'd call stability and agility. Stability comes from old wisdom. Agility comes from the new generation with their new ideas, with greater versatility, and hence the stability versus agility. So reverse mentorship is really critical and has worked very successfully in organizations because we get a different perspective. There's something to be learned from both sides of the coin.
100%. You want to add there, Alan?
I just wanted to add the key with the senior generation is how do they get redeployed to add value? Not retire. They've got a huge amount of value to add, but how do you redeploy them in that mentorship role, that guidance, and that's where it manages the conflict between that transition from one generation to the next.
Definitely. I do want to come to another theme that has typically come up when it comes to conversations around family-owned businesses, and it was mentioned slightly earlier. Playing to your strengths, planning for that wealth transfer, and of course, transfer in terms of leadership and succession planning. Ultimately, you need to identify who is going to be actively involved in the business, who might just sit on the sidelines and be an active shareholder, or who perhaps just wants to fly out on their own. And I'm keen to understand what nuances we as an audience need to bear in mind when it comes to those conversations, how to adequately structure for succession planning in a business. Maybe let's start with yourself, Ellen, and hear from your colleagues as well.
So I think the structure is quite important, and you need to separate the wealth from the business. Because as it becomes very complex and the family gets larger, we're seeing more and more African families starting putting family offices that look after the wealth and managing that, because it gets difficult, so they've got to protect and grow. Meanwhile, you're having a team actually running the business and actually diversifying into various businesses. So making sure those structures are in place and that communication and oversight is in place is very important.
Got you. I love that you're helping us understand the structures. What about the personality dynamics, Vanessa? Maybe this is where you can come in, hey?
I think there's always dynamics, no matter which family you operate in. I think the reality, as we said, is you've got to play to your strengths. Not everybody is going to be the next CEO within an organization. And I might, in fact, want to step back and go and do other things. And so it's identifying collectively as a family who's going to do what. It's like doing roles and responsibilities within an organization. It gives you clarity of purpose and what's next and where to go to from there.
Ayushi, your thoughts?
I was going to say that it's just important to remember you're still a part of the family if you're not a part of the business. And that's where people get confused. They feel like if they don't join, they don't take a role, they might not be a part of the family. And then the second thing I was going to say is there's many ways to get involved in the family. I know my family has a foundation, which I've been involved in, and that's something that you can choose to do while not actively being involved in the business and kind of finding the role that's right for you.
100%. I do want to go back to the audience and perhaps gauge the one key theme that often comes up, right? From a cultural point of view or where you might be placed geographically is female leadership, the heiress. And that typically does become a challenging topic for many families to have. And I guess we're seeing so many more examples of the focus on perhaps the female leader emerging at the top of their peers or colleagues and counterparts to actually want to take control of the business. I'm keen to get your thoughts on this one, Alan, if it is something that does add a different dynamic in light of the fact that it is International Women's Day.
Sadly, less than 20% of the CEOs of family businesses are female.
Sure.
That's globally. So that is a challenge. But what is interesting is what we're seeing is the female CEOs are driving the digital transformation in the family business. So they're taking the lead as opposed to the male counterparts. And they're also driving a lot of the ESG agenda, the social, the governance, and the environmental. So they're certainly being more aggressive and pragmatic in terms of that approach. But there needs to be more. In terms of that change, and especially in Africa, but we are seeing it. And it's once again getting the best person, starting that preparation from a very young age. As we've mentioned, how do you encourage that entrepreneurial spirit? How do you get the connectivity to the business and driving it forward?
100%. I'm also intrigued by those roles that you mentioned, CSI, digital, technology, and perhaps it does speak to some of the qualities that women innately have here, Vanessa, that you can share your thoughts on. I can imagine that does speak to perhaps personality traits and leadership traits that women typically do bring to the table, which are viewed as more transformational versus just transactional.
Yeah, and so I think, look, each and every one of us are different, and we'll all bring different attributes and traits to the table. I think, as mentioned earlier today already, what does a woman bring that's slightly different to maybe a man? And that is the empathetic side. That is the ability to understand really what an individual is going through, irrespective of whether they're male, female, or the like. So I think at the end of the day, we as females have a very solid place to play. Can there be more done? Absolutely. If you look at women on boards, there's only 40%. Stats are slowly but surely increasing. But we as a generation today need to start bringing the young leaders through. We need to give them the learning, with the education, the platforms, etc. And they're all there, and they will willingly take it. But we've got to develop our next leaders.
100%. We'll wrap it up with a closing comment from yourself, Ayushi, and maybe this is one where you can challenge all generations really to reconsider how they think not only about the family-owned business, but most importantly, the impact that business does have on society. Because that's another important aspect to remember, that whilst these businesses might start on a small and medium scale, but fundamentally they actually transform societies, contribute to growth, GDP, and of course employment within the economies that they serve. So your challenge to perhaps various generations to remember that mandate?
Yeah, so I think we said this before, but family businesses are like 50% of the economy, if not more. And this is worldwide. This is not only in Africa, this is in the US, this is in Asia too. And I think it's just important to remember that in family businesses, where multiple generations are working together, you are getting multiple generations of thought, of wisdom, of new ideas, of excitement, and that kind of is what holds it together.
Yep.
If there's mutual respect between the two. And I think that respect and understanding is something all generations and all families should strive for, because I think that's how you can work together, how you can respect the people above you, below you, and really make a difference.
100%. Well, our time is up, but I'm hoping that you've all walked away with some key nuggets from this conversation, right? To those of you who are in family-owned businesses, are you feeling slightly more empowered, informed, knowledgeable? I'm hoping so. But on that note, I really want us to thank our contributors to this panel, Vanessa, Alan, and Ayushi, as we make our way off of stage. Fifi and Tanya will make their way back. Thank you so much. A round of applause to our panelists, please.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.